Connor, and I live in Fairfield. I represent Fairfield, Bakersfield, and Fletcher, and I sit on House Corrections and Institutions.
My name is Barbara Murphy. I serve the town of Fairfax, and I sit on the Transportation Committee.
Lynn Dickinson, I represent St. Albans Town, and I sit on the Judiciary Committee.
Brian Savage represents Swanton and Sheldon, and I sit on the House Transportation Committee.
I'm Kathy Keenan. I represent St. Albans Town in the southern part of St. Albans Town and St. Albans City, and I'm ranking member on appropriations.
I'm Randy Brock. I represent Franklin County and Alberg in the Senate, and I'm on the Transportation Committee and the Finance Committee.
I'm Carolyn Brannigan. Randy and I represent the same district, of course, in the Vermont State Senate. That's all of Franklin County and the town of Alberg.
I'm Mariana Gamache. I'm the other representative for the wonderful towns of Swanton and Sheldon, and I serve on the Human Services Committee.
Carl Rosenquist. I'm from Georgia, and I represent Georgia in the House, and I'm on the Human Services Committee.
I'm Chuck Pierce, and I represent 4 towns, Richford, Berkshire, Franklin, and Highgate, and I'm Vice Chair of the House Education Committee.
Steve Bior, ranking member of Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife, and I represent Highgate, Franklin, Berkshire, and Richford.
We're missing 2 members this morning. Corey Parent had work responsibilities today, and Cindy Weed is ill. So I guess we can open it up for questions.
Yeah, is Pearlie here today? Does he still belong to you people? Pete Pearlie? Or did
No,
he
he
retire?
No, he hasn't been a member for 8 years.
Okay, we got a bad rap. Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Barbara, you're on transportation?
I am.
Yeah, there's a bill that I think Cindy Weed is sponsoring, I think was some transportation committee regarding vehicles and the mufflers and the,
Yes.
trying to require them to have straight pipes or to try to keep the noise down, I think.
Yes.
Having people living across the road from me that live by those as a mantra. Do you think that's going to go anywhere? I mean, I really would love to see it become law.
Well, I know that I've had a constituent speak to me of that during the campaigning time. So I think it's something that more than yourself have been disturbed by. The committee did just receive it either last week or the week before. I'm the clerk for the committee, and so I bring our bills up from the floor. And so I did see that that's been submitted. We haven't begun discussion of the DMV bill, and that would be a part of the DMV bill. But I do believe there is interest, and certainly with your speaking to it today, it gives us impetus, both Brian and I, to make sure it gets considered.
I didn't know you were on transportation.
And even Randy being in Senate on transportation,
Yeah.
Franklin County really has quite a voice and the ability to give some input.
I mean, it's so loud, and we have a noise ordinance, but I don't think that meets because they're legal right now. I don't think that's an enforceable issue.
Well, the enforcing is the challenge, and
Right.
that's always the question of how. With a noise ordinance, if it was a sustained noise that was reaching those parameters, you could do it, but you'd be hard pressed to get the evidence put together, I think.
But they're loud enough, you can hear them on the street when they're driving.
I think that's the point. I think they're designed for that.
Or sitting in across the road from the house idling and revving up and whatever,
Right. I think in my husband's days, they were called glass packs, and he was very proud of them.
They still are, but yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
I'd like another question to this lady here who represents Swanton. I think she would answer quite a few of the problems that we're having in the Palm Shore. But it's not so much the glass packs, it's the dogs. Now, when does it become a kennel? How many dogs can you have on your property before you become a kennel? Or a puppy factory?
I cannot answer you that.
Is there anybody here that can answer that?
Be an ordinance.
Sound ordinance.
Okay, no problem, I just wanted
Be a town ordinance.
I learned a long time
I
ago,
can find out, but I don't know if that's, not something that I'm aware of right now.
okay,
I mean, there are
Okay.
ordinances, yes, but I'm not familiar with it.
well, I'm sure you can hear it from your house. There's three gigantic doves, So, how many does it make a puppy mill?
Where is it located? I mean, where is this happening?
Let me see. A bit confused. McQuam Shore,
Where on the farm?
Mount McQuam Shore Road, McQuam Shore. I have to check the address. I can do that. I'll get back to you.
Okay, that would be a help.
I'll go to the town and have the town contact you and let you know.
I can look up the ordinance and then I can check to see what the
Sure.
situation is with that particular
Thank you.
location. And if they're in violation of anything.
Suzanne?
Hi,
Aye.
welcome.
Thank you.
Yesterday's paper, Saturday's paper, this article was in there, Governor Scott, suggesting schools spending caps. And I read it, and I really need to read it again. There was a lot in that article. But my Cliff Note version says that I understand that he really wants to put a cap on spending for schools and change that direction and put the burden on every community, and the taxes can be garnered from each individual municipality. And we're struggling enough as it is here. Our taxes are really high here for being in Swan. And at our last budget meeting, I told them that we're paying Chittenden County taxes for Swanton, and it's just not fair. So I'd like to know where you all stand on that. So I don't know if we go down the line or if there's one individual that's more cognizant of what's happening there, but it has to change. We can't afford to have that happen here.
So in the Senate, we have 2 committee assignments. My morning committee is agriculture. In the afternoon, I've just been moved over to the education committee. There's no doubt that on the state, under the items the state controls that are coming out of the Ed Fund, there's a great deal of room there for maneuvering to reduce that cost. There are also some things, as you know, that are local decisions, local control. And in fact, in the last 16 years, I've fought to keep local control as strong as it can be. But there are some things like paying for listers education, corrections costs, although I think most of that has been moved out. There are a lot of things in there that don't need to be paid for out of the Ed Fund. They could be paid for somewhere else. And my opinion is that those things ought to be moved out of the Ed Fund and not placed on the property tax. For the most part, it's the property tax, non-resident and homestead taxes that pay for education. There are some other sources, but that's the main thing. So my suggestion to Governor Scott has been to start first with what we control in Montpelier and move those things out. I think he wants to go, and I support him, I think he wants to go big time on everything all at once, but my opinion is one step at a time would be better. So we have just started to talk about all that in the Senate Education Committee. I know Chuck's on the House Committee, in fact, he's vice chair there, so perhaps he can add to that too, but I'm definitely aware of that. And the other thing that I would definitely like to see is local people continuing to vote on their school budget, not having anything mandated for a tax rate, for a budget rate from Montpelier. So I think that's really important, and as long as you continue to have the vote, you can always vote no if there's something that you feel is more than you can afford.
When we had our budget meeting,
I can barely hear you, I'm sorry.
When we had our budget meeting, the school board presented their budget, and we asked why is it so expensive. And there are a lot of additions to that are required now in the school system, that, children who can't ride on the bus with other children. So there are special taxis and services that are added to the increased cost of special education. And I understand all of that. But many of these children are, and I'm not saying all, but there are a lot of children who, as a result of opioid crisis, and their parents are no longer able to support them. And here we have a marijuana bill that just passed, and how does that help our children? I don't understand it, and I am so angry with everyone in the legislature because no one stood up and shouted loud and said, no, absolutely not. So now all these kids are going to be subject to, and they probably are anyway, but now that it's legal, I think they're going to be exposed more to aftermath of second, third-hand smoke on the person. These kids are going to be smelling this stuff that's going to be in their house. It's going to be on that person. They're going to go to school. It's going to invade and infringe on the other kids in the classroom, and it's wrong. I feel like I want to move back to my roots and go to Canada because I am so sick of it.
Well, I don't know on that. I'm going to let Chuck answer the first question.
Yeah. We'll know an awful lot more about what the governor is really proposing. He's giving his budget address tomorrow in the State House. In the House Education Committee, we are going to be the second group to see the education changes in funding. Right now, it's in Ways and Means, and they're going over several proposals right now, and they got a list of things from the governor the other day that they're looking at. So they're going to come out with something. And when they come out with that, it'll come to our committee and we'll get a chance to see it. So it's a little ways away before we can say just what they're going to do. But I think we should know a little bit more tomorrow when the governor gets his budget address out.
Many of those money bills too have to originate in the House. So if you keep track of what the House is doing, you have a better idea of what's going on.
In 2011, Vermont had a Blue Ribbon Tax Commission that took a look at the beginnings of all of our taxes as to how they all work together, because all these taxes are interrelated. And if you do something in education, it's going to affect the general fund and conceivably even the transportation fund. The study in 2011 dealt with the general fund, transportation fund, the bigger funds. It did not deal with the education fund. And the property tax, which is the third leg of the taxes, the property tax, the sales tax, the income tax. It didn't get to deal with property tax. Put it down the road, and it was a bad decision then because it never got done. What was done next was a look at the equity of the property tax. Does it do what it's supposed to do? And it does. It delivers funds equitably across the state. The question is, every single year, the property tax has gone up, whereas the number of kids in school has gone down. And the point is that cannot continue indefinitely, and we're at a breaking point right now in which everybody knows that our property taxes are too high. Everybody also wants local control. But in reality, there's virtually no local control now. And everybody says, well, we want to have local control in our town so that when we vote, our vote will determine how much we pay in taxes. But that doesn't happen. And it's not going to happen unless we change the Constitution because of the Brigham decision. And so every time we have a vote in our town that affects taxes, and we set taxes, conceivably some of our taxes are going someplace else because we're dependent upon how somebody else voted, not how we voted. And it comes a point where we got to say, we've got to put a stop to this. And we can't keep doing it piecemeal. And it may be that we're going to have to make some hard decisions that we don't like particularly. One of which is put a cap on school spending. Got to come a point at which we say some schools are too small and we can't keep them open. There was a school here, it was just in the paper a couple of days ago. They were down in Rochester. They were down to 3 kids in the middle and high school. 3. That should have been closed long ago. Because it isn't just the people in Rochester who are paying for it. You're paying for it. I'm paying for it. And only if we put some caps and simply say, look, we're not going to spend $21,000 a kid anymore. We're the highest spending state in the nation on a per capita basis. We can't continue to do it. And I think there are going to have to be some things at the state level. And we're a small enough state. We're smaller than, some cities in the United States, in which we're going to have to say, enough, we cannot do more.
What can we do?
What can we do? We can say at the statewide level that we are not going to spend more than X number of dollars per kid across the state, period. That's one of the things we can do. We're going to have to say that when we have schools that are too small to stay open, we can't continue to keep them open. Now, one of the proposals I think you're going to see is a proposal to create a commission. And it's the same way that the military dealt with base closings. No legislator would ever go and say, well, close a base in my town, even when they knew that the base was useless. And so they kicked the can over to some commission, so the commission could take the blame for doing what legislators didn't have the courage to do. I hope that we as legislators have the courage to do things. It may, in some cases, be unpopular, but may really be needed, and maybe things that most people know are common sense. The commission thing, I think you're going to probably see that coming out, though, as one of the suggestions about how to control school costs and how to deal with schools that are too small to stay open. I think you're going to have to look at funding for small schools as to whether or not that really makes sense. I think you're going to have to recognize that some kids are going to have to travel to go to school because they're in schools that don't have the resources to deal with everything that should be dealt with. These kids in Rochester were doing mostly online stuff because they couldn't afford teachers for 3 kids. So the notion of a kid being on a bus for 40 minutes or perhaps an hour, that may be necessary. To give a kid a good education, though, by taking them someplace where there are a variety of services, where there are a variety of courses, a variety of activities, and a core of teachers that can teach them. I think we're going to have to say that classes that are of 2 or 3 or 4 people are too small to be viable, and they've got to be consolidated. I think we're going to have to do a lot of smart things, and they're going to be tough things. And I think legislators are going to have the courage to face issues like that and deal with them and not kick cans down the road. And I think we're going to have to take another hard look at all of our taxes together, the way we tried to do in 2011, but this time do it right and finish it.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one comment regarding addressing a larger issue of what can we do, not only about education, but in general in the state. I have been for a long time saying to everybody that will listen, know who your representatives are and who your county senators are throughout the state. Tell your friends and your relatives. Everyone needs to spend not a huge amount of time, but legislators, voting records is all public information. Everyone needs to know how their representatives and county senators are voting on the various issues. All of that information is public. You have to take the time to look at it. And that includes myself. I'm out there just like everybody else. See the issues your representatives have voted on. See how you feel about it. If you agree, fine, and if you don't agree, then change it. Because until we make changes in this state, the way legislators approach things, there's not going to be any real fundamental change. That's my
I agree with you, Mariana, but the onus falls on all of you and all of your constituents to stand up and do the right thing. And
I agree with you. The problem is we who vote in a way that we believe is helping our constituents are a very small minority. And it's the rest of the state that is not going in the same direction that we go in. And this has been going on for quite a long time. But we need policy changes. We had, in terms of education, this past session, we had the governor's bill on the funding for health care for the education community, which was very well done, very well thought out, and would have saved the taxpayers, the property owners, a large amount of money. It was a win-win kind of situation. And it was defeated in the last analysis by the majority. And the reason, I really don't know the reason. There really was no equitable reason, except that I know teachers' union was very much against it. And I believe it was because of a control issue in terms of their control. That's my opinion, so.
Bob?
Bob Shea, Fairfax. I'd like to just give you a few of my peeves. I don't expect an answer. I don't even know if it'll register, but give it a shot anyway. Now, Mitzi Johnson claims her two primary objectives are to address global warming, even though we may be entering a 30-year period, and also pay equity. Well, you know, welcome to the Communist Republic of Vermont. Now, Governor Scott claims he's trying to limit spending, and yet he's come out with a plethora of new spending projects. Of course, we're going to pay for some of this with bonding. And talk about kicking the can down the road. All bonding is a deferred taxes to be paid for by our children. We have a real problem with property taxes, but something that no one wants to face is that rural dwellers are being discriminated against by having their education property taxes siphoned away to benefit urban redevelopment, whose primary beneficiaries are insider politicians, developers, contractors, and downtown merchants. This isn't fair. And it is a hidden tax on education, which is supposed to be a dedicated fund. And if anybody differs with me, I'd be glad to debate this issue in a public forum. It's a surreptitious way to siphon away education funds to benefit urban development. It's wrong. Now, we hear every spring from this legislature about how it's wonderfully they've balanced the budget. But the lie is proven at the beginning of the next legislative session, when the first order of business is a Budget Adjustment Act. What does that mean? It simply means the budget has never been balanced, and it's addressed in the following session. I hope somehow that you folks are listening, because we're one of the highest tax states and the highest regulated tax states in the country, and young wage earners are exiting this state en masse. When you consider that we now have a really lopsided proportion of people who receive state benefits compared to the people who provide taxes to support those benefits. We're next to Maine, we're the oldest state in the union. And just like Art Wolf said years ago, we're headed for a financial train wreck. And the way to attract workers to the state is certainly not for it to be one of the highest taxed and regulated states in the country.
Dick, and then Jeff.
Yeah, my name is Dick Day. I live in St. Albans. I want to address this pot bill. How many of you representatives support the governor's position in legalizing marijuana? Raise your hands. Okay. I want to thank Randy Brock for reminding me this meeting was this morning. We met down at the Sportsman's get-together down there in Essex yesterday. The unseen thing in this thing, in the marijuana thing, it's a backdoor gun control operation. You can't legalize marijuana in the state and have it illegal at the federal level. Because if it's illegal at the federal level, when you go in to do your background check to buy a weapon, you've got to state on that form whether you're using marijuana or not. If you're using marijuana, you can't buy a gun. If you lie on the form, you go to jail. Now, I don't know who paid the governor off or what the deal is here, but there's a lot of unseen ramifications out of this whole deal. Basically, I'd call for mandatory drug testing of you representatives and senators. But if that marijuana is legalized in the state, basically say you can say you're on medical marijuana and get away without getting drug tested. So what are we going to do with this mess here that's just been created by the governor? And I don't know who paid him off. Somebody paid him off. Because none of this makes any sense that we got a state law that's in violation of the federal law. And there's severe ramifications of this thing, and it goes a lot farther than most people realize, and buying a firearm is one of them. And this, to me, is a backward. The more people you put on drugs, the more they're dumbed down and don't understand what's happening to them. Now, this is big business in the state of Vermont, drugs. You got the illegal drugs coming in, and you got the legal drugs fixing the illegal drugs. You got the human commodity in this state being played on each side. One gets hooked, the other comes in with a remedy. Big pharma's laughing all the way to the bank on this. They're all making money on this deal. The cops and robbers economies in full bore. All they're doing is picking up people, throwing them in jail, letting them back out. They do the same thing over again, over and over again. Break into your house, rob you, terrorize the general society, but nothing gets done about it.
Did you have another question, Dick?
Is that enough?
That's good.
I think you'd ought to deal with the pot issue here and the governor and who paid him off. That's it.
I think that's a done deal.
Has it been signed?
He's signing it in private.
That's why I asked.
Just to respond to that for a minute, Kathy, okay, just the fact that I think it was almost unanimous here as far as your delegation against marijuana. And I know somebody said nobody got up to object or something. There were a lot of objections. There were a lot of people, myself being one, that very much opposed to the marijuana thing. And I'd say that, as I said, the majority of people at the table in front of you are absolutely against it because of many of the reasons that Dick is talking about. The problem is we don't have enough people that feel that way. So, I mean, that's one of the things that all of you can do, is elect people that have, at least on that issue, a like mind. And that's the only way we're going to change it. And
So you want us to all stand up?
no, go to the polls and vote.
Next time you vote, stand up.
Yeah. Well,
Hey, don't vote.
Yeah.
Just stand up and say, I'm out of here, and then we can do what the rest of the state does. They don't vote. It's an old system, but I got a question for that lady right there. The one looking the other direction. The answer to her question, too, at the same time. It's this close. She's talking about Chittenden. Okay, I believe she lives in Swanton, but maybe she doesn't. But I do know this, and I'm going to make it short and sweet. If I go to McDonald's in St. Albans, it costs me 1 cent more, $1.52 for a sausage and 2 English muffins. I take them home, I cut up the sausage, and I make me sausage gravy. My wife eats the other one. Now in Swanton, excuse me, it's $1.53. And $1.53 in Burlington, and $1.52 here. So when you have a coffee tomorrow morning with the governor, tell him that one for an explanation before he votes.
Perhaps you should look.
Because they're right here. They're right here on the doorstep, right now. And that's the only way we can operate. We have to raise taxes.
Thank you.
That's a tip tax.
For Randy and Carolyn, I'm not sure if you know this because you're not on the committee, but the notary bill that I think passed the House last term and is now in the Senate, is any idea where that's going to go? I'm being a county clerk.
It's in government operations right now, and I don't know if it's going to come out.
Being a county clerk and having done notaries for 18 years, and now the bill that would put that into control of the Secretary of State, I was just curious. I'm certainly not in favor of it. keep the local control there.
So I'll find out tomorrow where it stands, and if you have options, if it's going to come up for a vote, and I'll let you know.
I know it's early in the session, yeah, I wasn't sure, okay, thank you.
John?
You know, why do we need a third gender for a driver's license? Somebody, a couple of them are on transportation.
It's not in Senate Transportation.
No, I guess it's in house.
No, it's not in house neither. I'm not sure if that's going to be done by commissioner rules or how that's going to get, but we haven't received any bill that will authorize that.
So the commissioner of motor vehicles could do that on his own?
I'm not the expert there, but that's what I had heard, that it would probably be through commissioner's rules. But
What do you hear it would be? It would be it? The third gender would be it?
I'm not sure what the third gender would be. I'm trying to, maybe other, I don't know. Other, I would assume, but.
Or transgender.
That's ridiculous.
It's legal, they have protection.
Good morning, my name is Amy Brewer. I'm coordinator for Franklin right now, tobacco prevention, health educator at Northwestern Medical Center. I just wanted to bring up a couple tobacco-related stuff, as I do every single time. For the youth at Enosburg High School, Richford High School, and I believe MPU, although I have not confirmed it, are coming down to the State House for the annual rally on the Tuesday, February 6th. They'll be introduced on the House floor, and we'd love to connect with you all. The topic they'll be talking about is flavored tobacco products, which is something that youth are using and appeals to you, it's marketed to you. So we'll be talking about that issue, and I'm sure they would love to say hello to all of you, and I will email you all those details later today. The second is the Vermont Tobacco Evaluation Review Board annual report was technically emailed or posted last week, but I will also email you a link to all of that so you can kind of see what's been going on, so you can start to do that. And I just want to start with those 2 things. Thank you.
And this is the first year that we do not have enough tobacco money to take care of the enforcement, so we've had to move the money in because the money has been spent.
So it gets confusing. So there's master settlement agreements, and then for 10 years, because of Attorney General Sorrell's leadership, we had about $10 to $15 million extra coming in as a reward for his leadership in the master settlement. Those monies are gone now, but the master settlement agreement dollars are still there.
Right.
And we still get a fraction of that.
But what we were using in the general fund with those monies for healthcare and other things is no longer there.
Yep, and there's far less funding for tobacco, and you've seen youth at 25% use rates again, so, yeah.
Part of the problem with the e-cigarettes is that they're using them to vape marijuana.
Correct. And tobacco, all of which are scary for you, so I agree there's going to be detrimental effects for youth and it's still going to be tobacco.
Could I add to her?
Well, I want to see if anyone wants to speak.
Totally agree with
Okay,
that.
Sandy.
But you won't let me right now.
I'd like to give everybody an opportunity.
Oh, no problem. I can wait. I've been last all my life.
Not in my
You weren't
book,
today.
It's okay. I have no problem with it. I got plenty of food. Like the guy said, I could talk for 2 hours. I got a fire truck. I can talk all day.
So, first of all, I want to thank many of you I know were against the pot bill, and I want to thank you all for that. It is a sad day for Vermont. And I would just like to speak to Mariana's suggestion that you get to know all of your representatives. But I would also like to add that before you vote to make a change, that you make an effort to sit down and to speak with them. Because the kind of thing that is dividing this country is that we don't all get together, listen to one another, and try to work things out.
Can I just make a comment? Yeah, I mean, there are, believe it or not, there are some good things we work on, okay, that get done. One thing we've been working on in human services, and I think we voted the bill out the other day, was a bill to essentially give foster parents some degree of real authority in taking care of the children under their care. I didn't know this myself at all, but up to when this bill goes into effect, foster parents had to seek permission from Department of Children and Families, okay, DCF, to allow, let's say, a child under their care to go on a field trip or to do a whole lot of different things. And totally absurd. I don't know how it existed that long, but we worked on that bill, and it should be on the floor this coming week. And I believe we'll get unanimous support on it. So believe it or not, there are things that we do that actually are good, okay? Or at least we think they are. And that's certainly one that I'm proud of that we work on.
Carl, are the foster parents allowed to go into court now when they're having court proceedings? I thought there was something that they were going to...
We worked on that one last year, and yes, I think the judge absolutely could, depending upon the circumstances, still prevent a foster parent. But under most cases, the way I would call it, and maybe Mariana can help me on this, that the foster parent is allowed to be there for particular proceedings. I don't think it is for the termination of parental rights.
No,
here.
no.
Okay, no. But for other things relative to the juvenile or the child.
And I'm not clear on that. I think there was a lot of controversy about whether or not foster parents should just be able by them without really any clearance to just walk into the courtroom when things are being discussed. And we heard a lot of testimony both ways, and I forget now which judge it was that came in. It has to do with a lot of the foster care issues, and I believe the way it was left was the judge can say, yes, you can be here, but I think there's still at some level there has to be approval given. And it's very hard because sometimes those kinds of issues that come up with a child can be very controversial, and a lot of tension between the parents and the foster parents. And sometimes just the presence of the other party can spark a heated situation. So the court, together with the, well, supposed to be with the ad litem and the social worker, is supposed to be able to have input to make, to see whether or not this would be appropriate for the foster parents to be. So it's still not quite, it's not a yes or no situation, but they're trying to work on it to improve it.
Sometimes the foster parent is raising the child pretty much their input would be
Well,
beneficial.
yes, and sometimes there's been changes of social workers, there's been changes even with the ad litems,
Right.
so that nobody except the foster parents really know what the true situation of the child is, so, yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Getting back to the education, and Senator Brock talked about maybe a commission could do something. I believe it's Act 46, and they have the number on the school consolidation. Isn't that what that's supposed to address? And is that doing what it should do? And is that like out of all of your hands now? Because it actually is law, or how is that going to progress and maybe help these situations?
They are local decisions, whether or not they're going to consolidate.
Correct, but if they don't, the state will come in and do some
I
consolidating.
think there is a move to have that happen. But we have kids that are just not capable of post-secondary education right now. I'm wondering if maybe we could each very briefly talk about the bills or just identify bills that we're talking about here, just so we don't get stuck on one or two subjects. And we could go down the line. So Steve, you want to start?
In our committee, natural resources, fish and wildlife, we're not doing a whole lot on fish and wildlife. We've become a natural resources committee. The committee right now is working on a 3-acre parcel. It's a bill for water quality, but it's revamping old parking lots, anything that was 3 acres or more, or any impervious surface. New ones have to come up to certain standards of water, being able to retain water, keep the phosphorus levels and this type of thing out of them. But the old ones, some of them go back to 72 and before, those parking lots didn't have to come up to any standard. Well, now they're gonna make those old ones, if they're gonna do any redevelopment or anything, they're gonna have to come up to the new standard. And that new standard is gonna cost anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000 to the owner of those impervious parcels, between $30,000 and $50,000 an acre to bring up to the new standard. So there's a lot of talk about that. There's also a toxic chemicals thing that we're looking at, and the damn bill. We're going to seem to be working on that a lot too. That's making sure that all the states, or all the dams in the state are they know where they are. They're going to put them on an atlas, and they're going to be checking all of them supposedly for, are they dangerous? There's 4 levels of danger to a dam, and most of these dams, before this, we've only been concerned really with dams that held 500,000 cubic feet of water, which is a pretty substantial amount of water. This brings it down to even small dams that are ponds, basically. They're going to have to be, in the future, they're going to have to be checked by an engineer and decide how dangerous that dam is if it breaks and all this. There's a lot of nonsense in all the bills that I've seen so far. I sometimes wonder why we even put those bills in, but that's beside the point. They're there, and we're going to have to deal with them, and some of these are going to be expensive for individuals.
Has it passed yet?
Thank you.
No.
Can we move to,
Well, I've
Chuck?
got one thing I'd like to say.
And if we could just go down the line, then you can ask questions, and if we could kind of limit it to a couple of minutes, just so people know what we're doing.
Yeah, the big issue in house education this year is special education. That's the big thing that we're dealing with now. We've been taking a lot of testimony. There have been 2 big studies, one from what they call the district management group, a fellow out of Boston headed that up, and then the other one was a big study done by UVM. What they found is that Vermont spends more money on special education per student than any other state in the union. So what they're trying to do is to find ways to change the way we spend money on special education. So that's basically the big thing that we're going to be working on, and we will come out by the end of the session with a bill out of our committee on special ed.
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, one thing, several has been working hard most of the summer as well as beginning of the session on issues relative to the child care crisis in not just Franklin County, but in the state and the northeastern area of the country. People are having trouble finding people to take care of their children when they go to work. And so one of the issues before us was that the Department of Family Services had had changed a lot of the regulations, had expanded them, made them tougher in many cases. So we've introduced a bill to assure that the department would, how should I say, review waivers on the educational requirements for some of these home providers in particular, or even some of the center providers, to not drive them out of business because of the educational requirements. That was one of the chief purposes of this bill. 588 is the bill. I don't know if it's going to come out of our committee or not at this moment. But, you know, it's a big issue. We're very concerned about it. Related to it, and this is going to take some time, work through the whole apparatus in government, I guess, but the whole pre-K issue, where for 3 and 4-year-olds, each superintendency is supposed to provide up to 10 hours of pre-K education. Because of the, how should I say, the cross purposes between human services and education, this 166, which is called, that implemented this law, is becoming very complicated and causing a lot of disturbance in the daycare community, because in some cases they're trying to provide this pre-K and daycare itself. And as I say, since it's only 10 hours a week that's paid for by the superintendency, it creates a lot of difficulty. So keep tuned on that. It's an issue we'll be dealing with in the majority of the session. I'll let Mariana continue.
Can we try to keep it to 2 minutes so that people can ask questions?
I'll make this very brief. The other issues that we're dealing with in human services right now is H608, which is an act relating to older Vermonters. It's creating a commission, or creating a group, not a commission, to look at the issues for older folk involving nursing homes and all kinds of services, and to improve what is there, and also keep it within the bounds, or have it work along the stipulations of the federal law, because we're restricted in that regard. And the other was mentioned before about, this is H589, which is dealing with foster parents and that whole situation with children. Yeah, it was really amazing for us to learn that foster parents actually need a note, a pass from either the social worker or some other person within that whole community in DCF in order to allow a child to do anything that involves the school, or going to the movies. It could even be something as small as going to the movies. So we're working on getting that resolved, because that's the object is to put these children in a situation where they will be able to feel and function as most normal children do, and to have more of a normal home life. And when we run across things like this, it's absurd. The whole thing is absurd. So anyway,
thank you, Mariana.
Okay, my other committee, my morning committee, is agriculture. It's very important to Franklin County. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be presenting to the Senate our right to forestry bill. Several of you may remember a few years ago we passed a law we called the Right to Farm bill, which protected farmers against nuisance lawsuits. This right to forestry does a similar thing. It offers foresters, loggers, what's called a rebuttable presumption of innocence, that they are following within the law, unless they are not following accepted practices for forestry, or are disobeying any other law like Act 250 or local ordinances. So that bill comes up tomorrow on the Senate floor. I've already read through it, walked the members through it, so I think we'll be voting on it for Senate meeting tomorrow.
In the Finance Committee, one of the things we're working on are the implications of the federal tax bill on Vermonters, and how it will affect tax rates on Vermonters. We had a presentation from state economists and legislators' economists last week. The indications are that some people will pay more, some people will pay less. The people who will pay more certainly are people who are in middle to upper income. The very wealthy will get a tax decrease, the very poor and lower income Vermonters will get a tax decrease. Overall, though, state revenues are liable to increase by about $30 million a year as a result of the federal tax bill. And one of the things that I want to make sure of is that the money doesn't get spent, that the money actually goes back to the taxpayers who put it in the first place. So that's something to watch out for. The second thing that we did is we passed something creating a silver reflective plan for health care. And what that was, and without getting too far into the weeds, is the federal government rescinded the ability to give some tax rebates for health care for people at the lower income levels. By rescinding that, it meant that their health care costs would rise. Rather than, though, creating a rise in all of the silver plan costs, the proposal was to create a silver plan that looked almost identical to the plan that was previously subsidized, so that it could be offered at a lower rate to people who didn't need government subsidies. The real purpose, though, was to create a higher rate for people who are subsidized, so that the state could reach over across the aisle, put its hands in the pocket of the federal government, and through another subsidy program, recover those subsidies. It's a meta scam. It's a scam, which the government, which the state has done on other occasions to get the federal government to pay more money. Ethics of it, I think, well, I would question the ethics of it, but that's what we did. We were late in doing it. Other states have done this as well. We were late in doing it because we didn't have the ability to create that plan for the people who aren't being subsidized. Why? I referred to this on the floor as an I told you so bill. It's an I told you so bill because we locked every Vermonter into buying only from the exchange, and so therefore the state didn't have the ability to have the private sector offer a lower cost plan. This was a stopgap. We put a Band-Aid on it, but it's going to be back because the federal government is going to continue to change these plans, and eventually they're going to, I think, recognize the scam that was pulled in this particular case to get them to pay more, change it again and again, unless we unlock people from this disastrous exchange. It's going to happen again during the course of this time, and particularly if it happens when the legislature is not in session. There's no way to fix it until the legislature either comes back in special session or comes back overall. In transportation, just a couple of things. We're really doing orientations on where we stand on a number of issues right now, but there are two big projects that you ought to be aware of. One is the bridge between Grand Isle and North Hero. It's a drawbridge that needs to be replaced, and the plan will cost us $70 million to do it. That's a huge amount of money to do one bridge. The second is the tunnel in Middlebury, the rail tunnel under the town of Middlebury. That's another $70 million. And these big projects, we really, some say they need to be done. The question is, do we need to do them as expensively as we're doing them?
Dan, do you want to take a couple of minutes?
Sure. In our committee, House Corrections and Institutions, we have quite a bit of projects that will be coming our way this year. We allocate the water quality dollars that are capital funded, and so last year our allocation for different projects around the state having to do with agriculture, our allocation was $23,470,000. And so we'll be reviewing where those projects are and what successes have been occurring. We'll also be allocating the remaining $24,655,000, I think, for the continuation of our 2-year budget. Corrections and Institutions, or the capital bill, has a 2-year funding cycle, and so we'll be finishing up the funding cycle this year. I have some information here if anybody's interested on water quality and where we are in terms of spending cycle and projects within certain counties. One of the last Friday, the chair and vice chair, myself, and another representative of our committee met with Missy Johnson to go over the water quality funding and to discuss whether or not we're going to bring back our working group that we had last year, and there'll be more about that in the future. The other big item that we're going to be looking at this year is the whole bed issue that we have in not only corrections, but in mental health and some of the other areas like Woodside, which is a juvenile detention facility. And you probably read where there's been a report that has been released on state facilities and what our needs are, particularly in corrections for beds. This is a report that our committee has asked for the last 6 or 8 years. And last year we put in language that was pretty strong requesting it. Sometimes you should be careful what you ask for. We received a report, and we have 2 short-term problems that we need to deal with. One is fluorescent beds. We don't have enough of them, and we're competing with regular, if you will, mental health issues at the hospital level. There's a lot of people that are spending 8, 9, 10, 12 days sitting in an emergency room because we don't have a bed for them. They're usually acute care folks. So we have to do something about the fluorescent beds. We have to do that this year. That can't continue to be kicked down the street. And the other one is we have a secure residential facility that was put up as a temporary facility in the town of Middlesex. And it's a temporary facility, and the feds are looking to claw back $2 million if we don't put in a permanent facility for folks that are leaving the state hospital, as an example, and continuing their treatment at the step-down facility. So in a short view, that's it. I'm sorry. Thank you. Oh, one other thing. If I was one of the folks that did support the marijuana bill, and I would be glad to have a conversation with you afterwards, if you would like. Thanks.
In transportation, we're looking at, I believe in the future we're going to be doing a DMV bill, but we did just vote out on Friday our highway safety bill. And I would encourage you all, as you were encouraged to follow bills, to be really cautious, because what just got voted as the marijuana bill was actually titled highway safety. And our committee voted it 10-01 to pass it when it originally was what it was. It became a Trojan horse. The Senate completely eviscerated it and put in the popular language. So that's my one caveat and cautionary, is that when you do try to follow bills, it is challenging. And don't feel badly that you find it challenging. Just persevere. I also did vote yes on it, and I did because I felt it really was in line with what I'd said all along. I think we treat marijuana hypocritically in how we treat alcohol. And I'm hoping this gives us some equity status to be able to really manage the highway safety, the distracted and impaired driving aspects. We won't be using law enforcement resources to look for people that have personal use in their homes. The gentleman spoke to the gun connection. If someone is lying on a federal application, that's beyond whether they were legally allowed to have a joint instead of a glass of whiskey. And I really do encourage us to get over the fear of what this did. I like to say that I did support the governor's step, which was really, let's put this away and treat it equitably and look at the issues we have because of how it's being used now. And I think that this bill will help us be able to enforce the highway usage that we're seeing of all substances, alcohol being one of the absolute worst. So highway safety is once more back on our table, and we've put out a bill that once more includes actual highway safety, and I hope the Senate will support it and continue to move it along. We also looked at the Budget Adjustment Act, which does look at the forecasts of what your fundings are going to be and then adjust the spendings as the actuals are more in line and attainable. We did see a small increase in our highway fundings, our taxes that direct right to our highway expenditures, and applied some of that back to the town highways, which had had a small downturn back in July when they were adjusting against a negative forecast. So again, it's hard to put it in brief language without it being a soundbite that creates emotion. And I double endorse the concept of when you question someone's vote, please talk to them about what was actually in the language and in their thoughts. Dan?
Yes, I serve on judiciary, and we spent the last week of the session doing marijuana. We spent much of last year doing marijuana, and we did the first 2 days doing marijuana this year, and it did pass. I was in a minority that voted against it, but that's neither here nor there. The governor is apparently going to sign it. But we do have other things that are really important. We are working on a parentage bill, which is something that most people don't really pay much attention to, but the judiciary has been asking about this for probably 20 years. This is not about custody or any of that other stuff. It is basically trying to help establish criteria for who a parent is. It's an important bill. It tells you who gets in the door to the courtroom, and then after that, all the other stuff happens. But basically, we have lots of people. The traditional method of a parentage was a husband and wife who were married, they had a couple kids, they went through divorce, whatever. The issue is that we now have people who are unmarried. There are multiple partners over a course of time. We now have, between civil unions and gay marriage, we now have lots of people who are same-sex parents. We have people who, and it helps to define this, there was a commission that helped define what a presumed parent is, a de facto parent. We have genetic carriers, gestational carriers, we have IVF, we have all kinds of medical things that go with that, donors, and it outlines through the studies of this commission and through a Universal Parentage Act that has been done on a nationwide basis that's studied over a series of years, and we're using that as the basis of this bill, as well as the bill that's in Maine and a bill I think that's in Massachusetts. But everyone who comes in and talks to us says that this is something really needed and that we really need to go, and they thought that the commission did a really, really good job. There were doctors on it, there were people from OCS, which is the Office of Child Support, there was DCF people, there was the gay and lesbian community involved, there was, all kinds of people, lawyers who do this, who work in this field, and so it is actually a very important bill that will help the courts determine who a parent is. And we've had lots of testimony, and it's really a good bill. We are also doing something with guardians, another kind of issue, related in some ways, but very different. We're getting some things from Human Services that they have to push by our committee because it involves judicial decisions on things that deal with Human Services. So we're working on those things and others.
Okay, being on transportation, and Barbara kind of covered everything we've been doing. We did pass out the 2018 version of the Highway Safety Bill last Friday, and hopefully it will stay the Highway Safety Bill through the process. The one aspect, when we get back after the governor's budget address tomorrow, then we will start working on the fiscal year 19 highway or transportation budget. So it remains to be seen. We all come back to our desk and we'll have the white book that gives all the projects that the administration is following. On a side note, I did have a conversation last week ago, Saturday, due to the flooding on Route 78 and 78 being shut down. I had a transportation secretary, Flynn, was here. I had a conversation with him regarding, with the new Route 78, when that's rebuilt, the flooding will not affect transportation as greatly as it did. And of course, it still would not help the people. Now, on that issue, and I digress, I'm going more to the local representative, just an update, Vermont Emergency Management is continuing to compile information as what is required to make a request to the federal government for federal disaster recognition. There are dollar limits that have to be established, and this has to be done not only for the Swanton area, Swanton-Highgate area, but as well as other parts like Johnson and other parts of the state that also had some pretty significant losses. So that's where that stands, and they are working on that. So we'll just have to hopefully hang on.
We did the budget adjustment this week, and we have some stresses on our next year's budget, which include payroll, the contract that was signed, reclassification of employees, the veterans home. There are water pollution down in the Bennington area, the PFOA. And I'm happy to say that, and also Woodside, which we didn't get any type of funding for. Our reserves are full. The growth rate is 2.1%, down from 2.4% in the budget. And in this budget adjustment, the governor had put in some pre-funding for the next year's budget, which we removed. And we made up a temporary reserve fund to make sure that we would have enough money going through June 30th. So we did not spend any one-time money. We have gotten away from that in appropriations. And we are looking at it year by year and trying to deal with the problems that we have. And by pre-funding, what you're doing is that you're putting things at the top of the list for funding before you even get the budget bill for the following year. So we've done very well. We added some in our reserves, and I look forward to a good June 30th. Sandy?
I'll try to be brief because everyone has questions. I'd like to speak to primary prevention, which affects every single issue that you are all dealing with. And I would like to ask all of you to look at, to remember that when you're dealing with all of these issues. Prevent Child Abuse Vermont does the most parent education in this state, and they've been doing it for 30 years, and they do a really good job. And the bottom line is, and especially for the drug issue, how we raise our children affects all of these issues. Primary parent education is something that gets put on this end instead of this end, and when you're in dire straits, it's hard to do the first piece, but that's where we fight the hole in the boat. And the other issue, I wonder how you all feel about the proposed 900 plus bed facility in Franklin County.
I think to clarify things, we didn't know about this until it hit the media. So we have not had any introduction to what is planned.
We read it in the paper, just like you did.
And Lynn?
Yeah, I got a call from, a response from the messenger, and I know that our town manager, her initial notification was someone from CAX called her. So I heard it on the radio last Tuesday morning, and was surprised just like everybody else. I think that there's a real issue here of blindsiding our whole delegation and our public officials who really should have been given a heads up on this before that report. It wasn't just a report, it's actually a recommendation. And it's a very complex issue, with a lot of cross currents. It's going to involve men, women, children, elderly, nursing home type, geriatric, psychiatric. It also is looking at all of the standard mental health issues we have, mental illness that we have, and creating a new site for those people, those folks who are mentally ill, not criminals, not involved in corrections at all. And all of those things on the site that the state already owns, obviously seems to be at the St. Albans Correctional Center. It's a mega prison, it's a mega facility, it's a mega everything.
But it is not only one building, it's a campus that will include.
They envision a campus. The thing is, it needs a lot of work.
Obviously.
And I know that Dan is on Corrections and Institutions. They did hear something on last Tuesday, I believe, in the hearing.
Yeah.
But, it's all new to me, and I have been down there many times over the course of the past 20 years. It already is a campus. We have lots of small buildings scattered around, and I don't know how much land they expect to use, but I don't think the site's big enough for all that. We have a lagoon system for the septic, we have solar panels. It's in need of a lot of, all of those correctional centers need a lot of work. And I know in the past when we've gone down there trying to deal with the women inmates, and they're try to get the men to be taken in for detaining purposes with the local sheriff, we were told you couldn't have men and women in the same facility. You can't really have mentally ill people in an institution in the same facility as corrections unless they're forensic patients. Those are the patients that have both under the authority of the Commissioner of Corrections and have mental illness. Now, a lot of people in our correctional system with mental illness want to be treated. But we do have a secure facility in Middlesex. It's trailers, it's temporary. It's been there for a while now. But, there's a lot of questions that have to go into this. And, I think that it's really hard to not at least include the community in this all heads up. And it's a big, big, big facility that they're talking. I mean,
There's a lot about it.
Maybe Dan can be on more on that.
And they have said that none of this is a done deal. They're looking for input. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be in Franklin County. People are already complaining from the southern part of the state. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I'll just follow up if it's okay, Kathy. It's not a done deal. It's a recommendation. We will know more tomorrow what the governor's recommend when he delivers his budget address. None of us were included in any of the discussion or even knew about what was happening. And the representative from St. Albans, she mentioned some of the issues that we're going to have with that. We have a huge population of detainees. 400 and something detainees in the state of Vermont. Our incarceration, those people that are actually incarcerated or under the supervision of the Commissioner of Corrections is the lowest in 10 years, and that's 1,680 folks. I have real concerns about putting kids, the Woodside population, in the same, on the same campus as those that are in at St. Albans now. It also that 950 bed number also takes into consideration bringing back the 240 or 50 folks that are out of state right now. And again, if you have more questions, I have a lot more information on that. I'd be glad to share afterwards.
We're getting close to 9:30, but people had questions, and I will call your name, but anybody that has to leave is free to go at 9:30 that's here that has appointments or whatever. So there's Judy, Suzanne, Dick, Bob, then Dick, and the gentleman in the back.
Thank you, Cal. So my name is Judy Ashley. I'm the district director for the health department here in St. Albans. We cover Franklin, Randall counties. And I want to just thank you all for all the work you're doing. Just sitting here listening to everything that you have on your plate is pretty incredible. Most of you probably know that our commissioner, Dr. Mark Levine, chaired a subcommittee on marijuana for the governor. And the health department also put out, I want to tell you exactly, it was marijuana regulation in Vermont, health impact assessment in 2016. I wanted to let you know that's been updated with more relevant research data for 2017, and I'll send you the link to that. Amy's been kind enough to give me all of your emails, so I'll send them off to you. Part of the recommendations of legalizing marijuana, which we know is coming down the pipe, that the health department would like to see is regulating edibles and THC concentrations in marijuana and marijuana products, discouraging use and restricting access to marijuana by minors, and effectively implementing best evidence-based prevention and education strategies for minors. So even though the legislation may go forward and it may pass, there are things you can do to protect your minors, to look at other issues in that bill as it goes forward. And also just local communities can look at vape shops, where they're located, look at zoning, to make sure that we're doing the best we can to protect all workers. And if you have any questions, many of you know and have my contact information. my office is always available to give you information and education. So thank you again for everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Brian?
When it comes to the legalized retail, that bill, though I'm against it, however, I will see, and if I have to put in an amendment, I will. Presently, towns have to authorize the sale of alcoholic beverages in the state, in their individual towns, by a vote of the townspeople. And there will be language, basically, in marijuana that the towns will have to do the same thing. Each town will weigh in whether they want to have it legal in their town.
Suzanne?
Is the carbon tax buried in another bill?
I haven't seen anything on carbon tax, but I've been buried in the budget. I don't know what, none of us know.
There's at least 3 House bills dealing with the carbon tax. And I don't know what the Senate's doing on their side. Right now they're just sitting on the wall, so we're just keeping an eye on it.
I was so encouraged when I heard Mariana Gamache and Barbara Murphy talking about tracking bills. Oh, were that only possible. But the only way to track a bill is to look at a roll call vote. So most of the votes that are taken in the legislature, for all practical purposes, are secret votes because we never know how they're voted unless we take the time to call each individual legislature and find out how they voted. Now, I have a suggestion to address that problem so that the people can look up which way their representatives and senators voted on every single bill. I beg this delegation to sponsor legislation that would create an automatic electronic roll call vote for every single bill that has a deciding vote. That way there, all I've got to do is look up on the internet, oh, this is the way Representative so-and-so voted on such and such a bill. But there's no way we're going to know that without an automatic electronic vote, roll call. And the only way that I will believe the sincerity of Mariana Gamache and Barbara Murphy is to see that kind of legislation. Then we truly can track our legislative vote. Otherwise, it's a cynical assertion that we can do it, just try harder. No, we can't. Because a voice vote is a secret vote, and most people in the room don't even know how somebody else voted.
I can answer that. There has been a bill introduced doing with an electronic vote. And the bill has been introduced, it has been referred to the House Rules Committee, and the House Rules Committee, of which I'm a member, discussed it last week. It met very lukewarm, if not cold, reception. However, we did agree to solicit from vendors a system, and just what we're looking at and how a system could be designed.
See, I really think the legislature does not want us to know how they're voting on some bills. We all know about how some legislators are absent from a vote. They're really in the hallway. They don't want to be accountable for the way they voted. So let's get real here, folks. We need to have true transparency and accountability from our legislature.
But I'm saying the bill has been introduced and it's in the House Rules Committee.
How come it was received lukewarmly?
Well, the cost is being one.
That's baloney.
I know you're running out of time. The last government shutdown lasted 13 days. I got involved in this personally because of the Silvio County Refuge. They basically shut these refuges all down, all the forest land, everything that's controlled by the federal government. Now, they've done the same thing right now. What happened back then was the only ones they would allow to go back up into the Silvio County Refuge were the camp owners, and they had to stay in their camp. Now, with that government shutdown, that means your snowmobile areas running through the Silvio County area right now are shut down. that has a massive impact on the economy up there in the Northeast Kingdom, so you might want to be aware of that.
Quickly, I've been reading about TSA may require U.S. passports out of states that are not in compliance with certain federal laws. Have you heard anything about this? Or?
Yes, I have. And it's designed for those states that don't use what's called real ID, meaning for driver's license purposes. Vermont does use real ID, so we are not affected by that.
But what about the driver's licenses for people who are not citizens or legal in the country?
The driver's privilege card, which is used for non-citizens, and also some Vermonters who don't produce the documents for real ID have driver privilege cards. Those are not, and they have not previously been acceptable, for example, for things like airline travel. They're not valid for that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your focus, for your fortitude, for your giving to our Franklin County, the state, and all. I'm in awe of each and every one of you. I really appreciate you all. Thank you.